Liked by the sound of violence.
What's funny is when a guy is way bigger, then he doesn't always know how to act. He's like, oh, should I be more gentle, less gentle? Oh, I don't really know. Instead of just treating it like, okay, I'm a little stronger than you, I'll be a little bit aware of that. It's not about the male-female thing, it's about the size disparity. But then when the guys are the same size as the women, not all of them. Okay, this is not everybody. There are some guys who are amazing training partners, and I am so grateful for them. But a lot of the guys who are the same size as the women, they kind of have ego problems, and they really don't want to be seen to be getting beat by a woman. So they only have two speeds. One is like, yeah, all right, cool, this isn't serious, to being like, oh shit, are you fucking me up? Like, 100%, let me go, And so, I think that progress is being made, and I think that a big part of it is just getting more women on the mats and having leaders inside of the gym who are like able to direct the training sessions in such a way that women aren't getting patronized, but they're not getting smashed either.
What up, everybody, and welcome back to yet another Sound of Violence podcast. We are an MMA podcast that lets you know the MMA podcast you should catch, skip, and can't miss each week. This is episode 137. I am Pulver, and I am normally here with my co-host. However, knocking over shit. However, Crispin Daffer having all kinds of computer problems this morning and has work this morning, so unfortunately, he is not going to be able to make it to this one, but I do have some notes and stuff from him, so we will get into that here in a minute. It is finally November, so that means I am fully off the wagon. I'm actually a little glad we did not record at the planned 7:30 this morning, because I was hungover AF. So I'm now doing this live solo around 11:30 Pacific while Chris is at work. Fight start here in about 3 hours or so. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into format. Oh, before I get to that, though, I should shout out the Popov Vodka presents, Doug Stanhope presents, our sponsors, which is totally real and super not fake. I am drinking the Cubano style espresso, the brown ale from Cigar City Brewing, which is a brown ale made with coffee, lactose, and cocoa nibs. And it's fucking fantastic. I'm a big fan of this beer. Didn't realize it was a brown ale when I had one yesterday, but now that I realize it's a brown, it makes sense. I think I've had their Maduro brown ale before, if I remember right. I think their Maduro's a brown. Let me check. Cigar City Maduro. Cigar City, if you guys don't know, out in Tampa, is super fantastic. Yeah, their Maduro's a brown also. But yeah, Cigar City's fantastic. They're out in Tampa, and highly recommend this beer for sure. Also got a Dogfish Head Pumpkin Ale here as a backup as well. So yeah, since I'm running this one solo, fucking Bill Burr style, or Ashley the MMA Nerd style, or a billion other podcasts, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. Why don't we start with... You know what, we'll start with Chris's catch. I'm just going to touch on him briefly. I do have some notes on these episodes. However, I don't have notes from him directly on why it's a catch or anything. Although I could see it on some of these for sure. The first episode that he had as a catch is Fights Gone By, episode 177. I believe it's episode 177 anyway. That's the most recent one, and is the breakdown of UFC 244 from Jack Slack. It's pretty great episode. He talks about the fake-ass belt, or the fake-ass no-wrestling belt, I believe is what he's termed it as. And it's a lot of talk about just kind of he does a really good job of breaking down the matchup between Jorge and Nate, and some stuff that he thinks might be kind of problems for Jorge in the matchup. Specifically that Jorge's had some trouble with long straights, especially from southpaws in his last couple fights. I mean, most notably, of course, is the Till fight. And he also talks about the importance of Nate's pressure and hand trapping and whether it's going to wear on Jorge's cardio over time. So it's just a really good episode. If you guys are not subscribed to Jack Slack's Fights Gone By podcast, I don't know what you're doing, but it's definitely a fun one for sure. We are going to keep on moving on. Chris's other catch was Heavy Hands, which was episode 288, I believe. Let me look. Yeah, episode 288. I talk a lot about the BMF title and whether people essentially all being either hype AF or thinking it's a straight up joke, which, yeah, I mean, that's when it comes to any of these like super gimmicky kinds of things, I feel like a lot of times it breaks down like that. They do bring up the fact, or the idea that Nate's been cherry picking a lot of smaller strikers in his matchups lately, which is pretty notable. I mean, Pettis, there's a reason why he came back against Pettis, and that is his style is 100% made to beat Pettis' game, especially with his use of the clinch, which him and his brother have always leaned on the clinch quite a bit, but it seems like Nate leaned pretty heavy on it in that fight, and I will get to it during picks, but Nate didn't look great in that Pettis fight, at least not until late, like the third round or so. Even like late in the second, he started coming on, but that first round, he looked real off, and just looked super rusty. So that'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out in this fight and how much like the quick turnaround for Nate is going to help him stay sharp. So you got to imagine with that much time off, it's bound to happen to just about anybody. They talk quite a bit about, actually, how Jorge also is known for starting slow and sometimes flagging late, which are two things that are a fucking problem against somebody like Diaz brother, so it'd be interesting for sure. They also had some interesting comparisons on between Till and Adesanya in regards to the Gastelum matchup, which I thought was interesting. I didn't make that comparison or kind of draw anything from that originally, but there are some notable things. I mean, of course, the most notable is Adesanya's defense is light years beyond Darren Till's lean back James Vick-esque style of avoiding strikes. So that doesn't necessarily line up, but the straight like pinpoint shots, that's how Till has made his money in the UFC. It's just a sharp, long, straight left that he just damn near murdered Cowboy Cerrone with, which that was always a terrible matchup, especially since it was a quick turnaround for Cerrone too, if I remember right. But I don't know many people that had Cerrone going into that fight. Jesus, even Brendan Schaub was on his podcast talking about how he was talking to Cerrone about how Cerrone should really look into the dude he's fighting. So definitely interesting for sure. They also talk a bit about Lee versus Gregor and how that fight should be fun as hell. Chris actually mentioned to me in a text that Kevin Lee looks like he has staph on his chest, which I didn't pick up on. But man, if there's one thing you don't want is cardio problems if you're Kevin Lee, who is again making the cut down to 55 and fighting a dude who is notoriously strong as the fight goes on and a beast of a top game wrestler. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out for sure. I'm actually still flip-flopping on that fight as of right this second, so I still not sure which way I'm leaning on it. We'll get to it here after the break, but they also talk about the Anderson fight and it kind of being similar to the Serkinov fight for Walker in that it kind of just don't. We'll get into it later, but I still don't know what to make of Johnny Walker. Is it the Wagner Prado fight that he ended up on bottom getting pounded out and looked like he had little to no wrestling? Is that who that was? I can't remember off the top of my head. We'll get to it later, but definitely something to keep an eye on and an interesting point that they brought up for sure. So let's see. So for my catch this week, you guys will actually hear it on the upcoming break. It is The Writer and the Fighter, episode 49. We also tweeted out about it as well. This is the perfect place. If you guys have not listened to The Writer and the Fighter, hosted by David Golden of Oregon Sports News, I believe is the outlet he writes for. He is, of course, a writer. And the fighter is Jake Smith from Bellator, who just recently fought Adam Piccolotti in the card in, I believe it was Fresno, a couple weeks back, a month or so, maybe. Actually, more than a month, because it was before I went sober for a month. God, that was terrible. Hey, you guys, I don't think I'm doing Sober October anymore either. Fucking Ari's podcast on it convinced me that it's just bullshit, and unless they're going to do something interesting, I'm out. However, I did read all of The Corner, which was fucking so good. If you guys have not read The Corner by David Simon, Jesus Christ, it is so sad, but so good. It's essentially, I mean, it's the guy who, it's essentially The Wire, but kind of before it was fully fleshed out as The Wire. Very similar themes. I mean, all of David Simon's stuff kind of deals with a lot of class strife and addiction and stuff like that. So, anyway, so goddamn good. But yeah, back to The Writer and the Fighter. This is the perfect entry point. If you're somehow still sleeping on Writer and the Fighter, which you shouldn't be, it's a great fucking podcast, but this is absolutely the one you should jump in on. It goes all over the place, as they often do. Everything from, they recap the Bellator card, they talk about all kinds of crazy shit, talk about food, talk about, Jake actually mentions during this, well, I'll get to that in a second, but they do talk about how they're going to change up their recording schedule. It seems like they're going to switch to Wednesday releases going forward, which will be pretty interesting to see how that affects things. Day changes, it definitely change podcasts. It's weird that it affects them as much as it does, but I think it's just a mindset thing. As someone who is currently hosting a podcast with constant time changes on recording dates, it's interesting to see how it definitely does change kind of the mindset of the host and even the repertoire, depending on if you're recording after a long day of working or stuff like that. So, something to keep an eye on. But they talk a lot about how Chris Sunshine was supposed to fight Robin Van Roosmalen at Bellator, but Robin came in, 9+ pounds over, which is goddamn ridiculous. And then Jake talks about how they're going to make him move up to 155, Robin. And Jake's talking about accepting that fight and wanting to do it in Japan. And he says the rumor is the Bellator New Year's Eve card in Japan is going to be under Pride rules, which would be fucking dope. Oh yeah, and also Jake has a great segment about how he's going to go to Japan to find Bob Sapp. There's so many good jokes in this show. I can't recommend The Writer and the Fighter highly enough. But yeah, they talk a lot about, they also talk about Ricky Simone getting booked against Rob Font. And David pitches all of his best Font puns. It's a lot of stuff like he essentially, by the way, David came up with what I would argue is one of the greatest, like, goofy gimmicks that you could ever do on media, for media days, which is he thinks that the whole time Ricky Simone should just replace Rob Font's last name with a different font. So like, when I fight Rob Times New Roman, it's going to be good. Or when I fight Rob Wingdings, which that is fucking hilarious. And only the writer nerds are going to really like it, I feel like. But goddamn. I would also appreciate a pretty sweet Microsoft 2000 Clippy reference. I think that would be real good. I don't know if anybody would get it, but I think it'd be pretty goddamn funny. But yeah, it's just a really solid episode all around. They also talk a lot about Nate's atypical test, since that they recorded right around the time when all that craziness was going down. And then you guys will hear on the break about how Jake Smith says he would be so mad if he had to fight a Diaz brother. He's like, how are you gonna? Well, you'll hear it, but at least I believe the line is, it's just disrespectful. At least enunciate if you're gonna talk shit. Which is really fucking funny. They also debate whether Askren's a top 10 welterweight, which is something that a lot of podcasts talked about. And it's interesting to see people with UFC allegiances and ties to the company leaning a little hard on the idea that Askren was never good. Like, I heard a couple podcasts where they did that, which is kind of weird. I think it's pretty clear that Askren was extremely late in his career coming over to the UFC. And I feel like, I did hear a decent amount of people giving that some credence, but not nearly as many as I would have thought, so. I don't know. Something to keep an eye on. But yeah, that's my catch for this week is The Writer and the Fighter, episode 49. It's a really good show. I can't recommend it highly enough. So that is my catch. We will keep on moving on. Chris doesn't have a skip, it looks like. So for my skip, it is Phone Booth Fighting. Let me figure out which episode this was. Are they still numbering their... I feel like they stopped numbering their podcasts recently. Let me see. Episode 249. Nope, that is the old episode. Their fucking website is not helpful. It's really just not helpful. Okay, fine. I'll look on their fucking podcast feed to see. I really should have wrote this down ahead of time, but been drinking for 2 days. So that's going well. Also, shouts out to Evan Williams Bottled and Bond. Maybe the best $15 whiskey you can buy. I don't know why I shouted that out, not the Lefroy I was drinking earlier, but whatever. You know, do as you gonna do. Phone Booth Fighting, it was... Oh, yeah, they stopped numbering. It was... Looks like it's actually episode 251, technically, but it's titled UFC 244 Preview. The problem that I had with this, and the reason why it's a skip for me, you can't title your episode UFC 244 Preview and then spend 35 to 40 minutes talking about politics. Just very, lazy. Maybe it's because I don't give a fuck about politics in general. I think it's a giant waste of everyone's time to deliberate on it or even act like anyone has any say in anything. And it's not all driven by money. But instead, we got to hear, to be fair, they had Mel Spicer, Frank's new strength and conditioning coach, who he's worked with in preparation for his recent fight against Roy. He also has Carl Prince, his head coach, who's also in studio. So it's fine. The stuff where they talk about fights was good. Where they talk about Frank's fight and how they know that Roy only trains boxing, so they weren't really worried. They figured he wouldn't at all be able to deal with the inside leg kick, which they absolutely nailed. It was one of Frank's best performances. Didn't slow down or anything. So all of that talk was cool. The UFC 244 stuff was good, but there's 40 minutes in the middle where they're just droning on about politics. And it's just, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know who that show is for. But what are you going to do? Also, a lot of vegan talk. So if you're one of those people who, I don't really care about vegan talk, I listen to too much weed stuff for it. It kind of just glosses over me at this point. But a lot of vegan talk in there too, since Frank's just recently on a vegan kick after seeing James Wilkes' Game Changers doc. So I don't know. Not the worst episode. If you enjoy that kind of talk, then you would probably like it, but complete skip for me. Just not enough MMA related content in the episode. Let's see. And then Chris's can't miss this week is the MMA Roadshow, which is, where are my notes on the MMA Roadshow? There you go, episode 240. So John talks about, they're both in, it's John and Cold Coffee in Vegas, I believe. Actually, no, maybe they're in New York. I didn't write it down. I'm assuming they're probably in New York. It was Cold Coffee, John Morgan, and Mike Bond who sat in. But John talks about getting a call from the UFC. Him, Okamoto, and Aioli all get the call, which means the UFC has a statement they want to release. And they talk about sitting down with Hunter Campbell about the Nate Diaz announcement and follow-up. And he plays a clip of that interview. I like this episode quite a bit. I can see why it's a can't miss for Chris. A lot of I like John Morgan so much, but part of the problem I have with a lot of John Morgan's stuff is just that since he is one of their go-to guys for announcing stuff, it's one of those weird balances where he definitely, I wouldn't say it's as rough as Access Aerial necessarily, but definitely what I do enjoy about, let me rephrase this. What I do enjoy about how John Morgan handles this stuff, especially on his podcast, is he will absolutely state, like, hey, obviously doing, like, they called me down, they asked me to do this stuff. He'll talk openly about some of the lack of transparency and stuff like USADA's rule changes and all that. And he'll question stuff openly on mic. So while he will still just play clips and interviews of Ali saying that Ali's done fighting with other people and then literally attacks Abe Kawa less than 7 days later. That stuff is kind of weird sometimes, but I enjoy that. At least John is, like, he will come out and just kind of state his feeling without going too far to ruffle feathers. So if you read between the lines on a lot of stuff that John talks about, you can kind of pick up on that. I do also know that John Morgan tried the BMF wings at Buffalo Wild Wings. That's what I heard. So that is pretty goddamn hilarious. And I know Chad Folks, wow. Just combine the two of them. Ben Folks and Chad Dundas are going to Buffalo Wild Wings to try the BMF wings, which I'm guessing it's just like the generic, like, pineapple and like mango habanero, something like that. Seems to be generally like what they just go. Every fucking lazy wing combination is just some combination of sweet and fire. So I'm guessing it's something like that, but. You know, you gotta be a bad motherfucker and buy wings at Buffalo Wild Wings. I don't know. They also talk about, they play the clip of the Nate scrum, and they talk a bit about how it should be Mike Tyson handing over the belt instead of The Rock. I am not doing nearly enough service to this episode, because I kind of listened to it. I don't know, it didn't stand out to me, so when we get Chris back on next week, I will have him elaborate a little bit on that, so we can get kind of his take on why he enjoyed it. But it was a fun one for sure. I mean, anytime John Morgan and Cole Coffey are hanging out, it's always a good episode. And then add Mike Bond, the young Mike Bond, the statistician. Always a fan. So definitely worth checking out. And then my can't miss episode for this week is shocking yet again. I am going with, Fernanda Praches's podcast, which she had Leslie Smith on to chat about MMA and other stuff. And I mean, if you heard that there was a podcast hosted by Fernanda Praches with Leslie Smith where they just talk about stuff for an hour, fucking you already know. This show is essentially just a giant dedication to Leslie Smith. We're just the Leslie Smith Memorial Podcast. As far as I'm concerned, she is hands down one of the most influential people in the sport, and history will extremely kindly upon her as far as I'm concerned. Her and the entire Scrap Pack, but especially her and the Diaz brothers, they fucking, time will tell, but they are going to have huge changes down the line that will be accredited to them, just for standing up and speaking out. And it's something that they've always done and never shy away from. So, hard not to be a giant fan of it. But it's just a great episode overall. Leslie talks a lot about Project Spearhead and her involvement with it. And since all the what are the cards called that they were having everyone sign? I can't remember off the top of my head now. Well, I can't remember the name of the card. Anyway, all those are only valid for a year, and so since it's been more than a year, those are no longer valid. But she talks a bit about some of the information coming out during the UFC antitrust suit, about just some of the straight numbers and the tactics that were happening at the UFC. She talks a bit about how it's kind of an interesting time, and that it'll be interesting to see how all that stuff plays out, and it feels like she's kind of biding her time and waiting for a fighter at the UFC to kind of step up and take up the mantle that she had, her and Kajan. So, I mean, fucking Jesus, somebody needs to do it, but who knows? Because fighters sure as fuck don't understand unionizing or want to do it, evidently. I don't fucking get it, but there's a lot of fun stuff in this episode. I say that. She talks a lot about being depressed, and especially from social media after getting cut by the UFC and just all the craziness surrounding that. And she talks about kind of coming out of that depression and getting back into MMA through the Wimps to Warriors program and through being in the corner during Kerry Melendez's fight back in September. And it's interesting to hear her talk about Wimps to Warriors because that's, of course, I almost said promotion, but it's not really a promotion. It's I don't know what to call it. It's a program, that's the word I'm looking for, where essentially everyday people go and try and they train for, I think, 5 months every day at 7 a.m. and they have a fight at the end of the 5 months. It's the same thing Richard Hunter did. He did it last year and then he did it again this year. Good news, Richard Hunter was not matched up against a 6'7", 20-year-old this time. Bad news, still lost. So Richard Hunter, maybe not the future whatever weight champion, but it's an interesting program for sure, and I've really enjoyed the stuff that Richard Hunter has talked about in regards to it on the Phone Booth Fighting podcast, which I mentioned earlier. Also, that same, I believe our episode that we gave our favorite MMA podcast episode last year during our award show, I believe was the episode that Doug Stanhope came on of Phone Booth Fighting, where they talked about Richard's Wimp to Warrior fight. And they're hanging out in a bar. It's pretty great. But it's just interesting here, Leslie Smith kind of getting involved with that and how it really kind of changed her mindset on not only the sport, but just in general. I thought that was pretty cool. They also talk a lot about how Nate's changing the way USADA is dealt with and how people will deal with it going forward. They talk a lot about the exchange between Leslie and Justin Buttholes. Yeah, I said it the way I said it. It's just a really solid episode. She shouts out Shannon Knapp multiple times, just for being a huge factor in that. Like, not only did Shannon Knapp give a shit and really brought women to the forefront, but also Shannon Knapp, which is something I didn't know, but makes perfect sense now, like, after hearing it. Shannon, I guess, from the beginning was always making hair and makeup available to all the female fighters, as well as, like, would have hair braiders that would come to your room and do cornrows and all that stuff for your fights, which is kind of a huge fucking thing. And it shows the level at which Shannon Knapp cares, which, yeah, if you guys have listened to this podcast for a while, you know I'm a huge champion of Shannon Knapp, and I'm always pushing how she is extremely underrated in how much she does for especially young up-and-coming fighters or fighters that are looking to make their way back to a big promotion. Yeah, the turnover in Invicta is a little rough. It's not, of course, it's not their fault. It's the UFC deciding to use them essentially as a feeder league. But, I mean, Invicta's still putting on great fucking fights. The card that happened yesterday was really fun. Just tons of crazy finishes, just a wild card. So, definitely, if you're not watching Invicta, I don't know what you're doing, because it is fantastic. But it's just cool hearing Leslie talk about all that stuff. And then she also talks about, as you guys heard in the intro, talks about training with dudes and how sometimes it's a weird dynamic that can occur for sure. So I thought that was pretty rad. It also sounds like she's going to grapple in her next fight, which is interesting. She mentioned that, oh yeah, seeing Kerry Melendez out there like grappling when that's not her like background that she came from and doing so well in it makes me want to go out and grapple more, which is great in theory. Leslie's grappling is really underrated. However, Kerry Melendez spent that entire fight on her back. To be fair, she clearly won it. It was throwing up arm bars and slamming home elbows from guard, throwing up triangles. She just did really well in general, but scary to try and win rounds off your back. So while I don't think that's as much Leslie Smith's game, just something to keep an eye on. Because I forget who she's matched up against next, but should be interesting for sure. But anything Leslie Smith is involved in, I am 100% on board, and so this was an obvious can't miss for me. Cool. So I'm gonna take a sip of this beer. And then we are going to get into the new show that I checked out this week. I listened to SWAT MMA, episode 52. When you hear SWAT MMA, you're thinking, wait, is there dudes who are former SWAT team members that are now have an MMA show? No, definitely not. It's the Smoke Weed and Talk MMA podcast, hosted by Jared and Paul. It's fucking great. It's located in Vegas. I think that's where at least that's where they record out of. They're live on Thursdays. It's just great. It reminds me a lot of the old days, like the podcast and John Doe Radio. Why can I not remember the name of Paul's show? With Brent the Great and Angie. I think her name was Angie. No, McKenna. I think was her name. What the fuck was that? Something Marijuana Radio? Anyway, it was the other show out in Denver back in the late 2000s. Anyway, I've listened to a lot of weed podcasts over the years. I was an intern on a weed podcast way back in the day. But this show reminds me a lot of that, but it actually reminds me of my buddy, oh my god, I can't remember his name either. These are all people from like a fucking decade ago that when I used to be way more involved in weed podcasts. Why the fuck? His name's Josh, but I can't remember what he goes by. Anyway, he was on the Treehouse Chronicles, I think was the name of that show. It reminds me a lot of those shows, but with more of an MMA bent to it. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. They do a Weed of the Week. This week was Monster Cookies and Skunkberry. And they are, since they're in Vegas, of course, and weed's legal out there, they are super well informed, talking about the terpenes and the kind of chronology behind the strains and all that. Really interesting. I always dig that shit. And then after that, aside from that, it's just a fun fucking podcast. Talk about Randy having a heart attack and being the kind of dude who tried to roll it out with a foam roller. They talk about Nate's atypical test and the need for established thresholds for USADA. Talk about Nate's statement possibly saving him from arbitration, which is something that basically doomed guys like Josh Barnett in previous examples of this kind of stuff. And then they give their picks from the top down of UFC 244, and they recap Bellator a bit. Just a really fun show. I'm absolutely going to be listening to it going forward. I'm a big fan of those guys, so definitely recommend checking that out. Like I said, they live stream on YouTube on Thursdays, I believe, so pretty cool. And then the other new podcast, and Chris listened to that one as well. So next week I'll have him come on and give his take on that also. Because I'm curious to see what he thinks of that. And the runtime on that one's around 63 minutes or so about an hour-long show. And then the other new show I listened to was Combat Sports 101 Episode 7, which has a runtime of around an hour 45 or so. It's the second version of their show. They did a show previously. First off, I'll say, it's hosted by the Rhino and Jeff, who he calls Essence a lot. Don't know what that's in regards to. Definitely a weird fucking nickname. But the guy who's the Rhino, first off, I'm not sure if it's the same Rhino from the MMA community forums. I'm not positive, because he said he's a former fighter. And I'm pretty sure Rhino on the MMA community forums was a former fighter. I want to say he had a podcast, but I don't remember. So I'm curious if that's the same dude. I don't know. I haven't been on the forums in a bit. So either way, the Rhino, true to his name, is a morning radio sounding motherfucker. That dude is doing full on puke voice morning radio style hosting. I don't necessarily dislike it. I don't think it's distracting or kind of. It's not irksome or anything, but it definitely is a thing he's doing. He's very broadcasty, for lack of a better description. So if that's something that kind of wears on you, it might be rough, but I normally that's the kind of thing that really bothers me, and it didn't get to me at all. I actually just kind of helped move the show along, which I guess is the intent behind that voice. Doing we're coming up live. We got the 5 and the 5, and the 405 meeting with the 805. traffic and weather, doing the classic Adam Carolla weatherman bit kind of thing, where it's just real pukey and so he has a little bit of that, but it didn't bother me. And then they had on as guests Ashley the MMA Nerd and Juice from Fighting With Myself podcast. I believe STD on Twitter. It's like underscore STD underscore. What's his actual? Here, let me pull his actual tag, because he was actually the person who brought it to my attention because I saw him tweeting about it. Yeah, at underscore STD underscore. He nailed it in that he tweeted out that it is an ambitious crossover, and it absolutely was. But it's a super fun episode. If you want Ashley the MMA Nerd to just kind of chime in with little like barbs here and there, and then just randomly kind of dunk on Bellator on accident, since evidently she slept through Bellator 232. So it's fun. Juice from Fighting With Myself is crazy and hilarious as always. Rhino also. So here's the thing I could not get past. Rhino, while he's doing his like very kind of morning radio-esque voice, he sounds almost exactly like when Will Sasso does a Will Sasso character. And I don't mean when Will Sasso does a character. I mean when he goes on, like he did this on 10-minute podcasts a couple times back in the day. He does it a lot when he goes on Chris D'Elia's podcast or on Fighter and the Kid, where Will Sasso will do himself as like an over-the-top Will Sasso, where he's just like, you could just tell he just barely weirdly turning it on in like a, he's doing a bit, but the bit is just doing himself, but just a little bit more. It's I can't explain it other than that. But if you listen to Rhino, the Rhino sounds a lot like Will Sasso already, but he sounds specifically like Will Sasso when he's doing like that weird. I wish I could think of a great example of when he did it. I mean, the writer or the Fighter and the Kid, he almost always does that character where he like when he comes on and dunks on Brian over and over again for being old. Like that Will Sasso, that's a lot like what the Rhino sounds like. So couldn't get past it. It was something that just kept sticking in my head. So thought it was worth bringing up. They also talked quite a bit about of course, they mentioned the Bellator card, which we talked about. They also recap the UFC card and then give their picks for the UFC 244 card that's happening tonight. So all in all, just a super, super fun episode. And if you like any of the people involved in that, I would definitely recommend giving it a listen. And even if you don't, it's just a fun show. Oh, shit. I forgot at the top of the show to do the news segment, which we talked about last week. We're going to start doing MMA podcast news, since I don't know anyone else who's going to do it if we don't. So, Anakin Florian added a new segment this week where they're doing a rapid fire essentially segment where they just give picks for all the undercard fights. I think it's just going to be for pay-per-views, it sounded like. But Kenny and Ian Parker kind of just fire off quick picks for the undercard with like a couple word statement on how they think the fight's going to go. I actually really liked that addition. I think that's something to keep an eye on. Writer and the Fighter we talked about is now going to be releasing on Wednesdays, it sounds like. And huge news for everyone who listens to podcasts. My can't miss episode this week, well, actually, Fernando Proces's podcast used to be behind the paywall for The Athletic. You can now find those everywhere you listen to podcasts. So, it looks like they post them to iTunes. I assume they post them everywhere else as well. But if they did post them to iTunes, which I know they did, I went and double checked. Now, The Man and the Myth, MITH, well, actually, and Gross Point Blank are all available on iTunes, which means if you use whatever podcast player, just about every one of those pulls from the iTunes information. So you should be able to find all that info there. So if you just search for any of those shows, they should come up in your player. And it's great fucking news. They're all really good shows, and I can't recommend them highly enough. So absolutely, if you have been sleeping on any of the Athletics podcasts because they were behind the paywall, they no longer are. So definitely go out and subscribe to those. And it looks like Josh Gross is planning on having Randy Couture on next week, which will be interesting. He was supposed to have him on 2 weeks ago, and Randy had the heart attack. He was supposed to have him on this week, and Randy's like shooting a film or doing something still. even though he just had a heart attack. So he's supposed to be on next week, which will be pretty interesting. So definitely recommend that. Speaking of Gross Point Blank, actually, I'll get into some of the honorable mentions. Gross Point Blank, the OG BMF, Tank Abbott joins the show. A really good episode. He has Tank Abbott on to kind of talk about the idea of Tank being the OG bad motherfucker, and a lot of stories about him fighting in Huntington Beach, and talks a bit about the ESPN 30 for 30 on Chuck and Tito, guys that Tank respects, stuff like that. So really good episode. Protect Your Neck, episode 155. Dan Tom is just on fucking fire this week. Darren Till's on the cards. You already know he got some sweet box in there. He has a lot of really good arguments for why he's picking certain dudes. Dan is still going with the Blagoy, I like boy, even of nickname, which is upsetting but very fucking funny. He talks a lot about the barren wasteland that is the ESPN Plus search bar, which, good God, this probably doesn't apply to most people because they're probably not going back and searching for, like, oh, what's the last 3 fights that Julio Arce had? But ESPN Plus is fucking unusable. I end up having to watch I'll shout it out since Dan Tom shouted it out. I end up having to watch everything on fucking MMA Core, even though I have Fight Pass, I have ESPN Plus, but nothing is ever tagged correctly, and it's all fucking impossible to find. So it's easier for me to steal it than to use the thing I pay for to watch it. It's fucking insane. So, yeah. Fuck ESPN Plus, I guess, is my point. He also during that episode mentions his bias for the Julio Arce fight, and it's one of the reasons why I really like that show is Dan Tom will absolutely come out and be like, listen, I really like this guy, or listen, I really don't like this other guy. So my pick here is not necessarily based on tape study or on strategy. It's just I can't deal with dude, which I always enjoy for sure. It's cool to hear that perspective. Like we've mentioned on this podcast a million times, I'll never pick against Leslie Smith, as demonstrated multiple fucking times. So I always appreciate when shows, especially shows that focus on picks, are quick to say their biases, because I don't know. I find it interesting, number one, but also because it kind of helps you gauge the fights more accurately. Let's see. Fits in a Fighter, episode 17 with Uriah Hall was really fucking good. You've probably heard parts of Uriah Hall's story previously. I believe UFC Unfiltered way back in the day talked a bit about him growing up in Jamaica without running water and all that stuff. But he gets into a lot of the beef between him and Tiger Schulman and how they kind of fucked him over. And it's a really interesting episode. Uriah's always been a super smart guy with, I've always really enjoyed interviews and stuff he's done. He's really eloquent, and he's really, like, trying to think of the right way to phrase it. Dude just seems like he is very fucking sharp. Like, he seems like he is one of those dudes who can recall shit, like, note for note off the top of his head and never miss a beat of it. Which I am the exact opposite. My memory is hot trash. I'm sure the booze and weed does not help that either. But yeah, really good episode with Uriah Hall and Brendan Fitzgerald. Between Rounds Roundtable for UFC 244 is fucking fantastic. Steve Juan, Jeff Sherwood, and Dean Thomas sit down with Jack Encarnacio on the Between Rounds Patreon feed, and they break down the UFC 244 card. Anytime Dean Thomas is talking in depth about strategies and matchups, as well as anytime Jack Encarnacio is hosting anything, that's automatically something I will listen to. And this was a great example of it. So that's definitely worth checking out. Co-main event podcast was real solid. I don't remember what episode this was. What was it? Co-main event. It was episode 376. It was really solid. Ben's back from the UK, and he talks about kind of his trip over there for his birthday that he was on last week. They talk about their assignment to try the new UFC partnered BMF sauce at B-Dubs. It's goofy as shit. Just a fun episode for sure. Chad's real angry that we're just still attaching gate to everything like it's the fucking 70s. Just because Nixon did something one time at a building called Watergate does not mean we need to call it fucking USADA Gate or whatever the goddamn phrase is that, or Elbow Gate now, I believe is the new one with fucking, Jesus, with Kelvin Gastelum. Anyway, pretty fun episode for sure. Actually, speaking of Elbow Gate, the CME Power Hour and appreciation of Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal was really good as well. I really enjoyed the phrase, Nate's an elder statesman of the real shit. That's a phrase that came up on the show. Really enjoyed that. Care Don't Care was really good. Steffi Crooklyn, John Nash, and Eugene S. Robinson preview UFC 244. Insane amount of cares on that, which is pretty rare. It's actually probably one of the most cared episodes ever. So definitely worth checking out. It's always more fun when they give a fuck about the card. It's definitely better than the fucking Shenzhen card or whatever. Morning Combat UFC 244 preview was solid. Luke sat down with Chuck Luke Thomas, I should say, sat down with Chuck Mindenhall and Aljamain Sterling. Definitely a fun episode. Aljo also did the weekly scraps, episode 46 this week, which was real solid. Kind of just recaps a lot of the fights that took place over the weekend. He talks about partying with Al and his girlfriend for her birthday. A lot of real estate talk and refinancing mortgages. Pretty interesting. And then he also had an episode that he did a UFC 244 BMF breakdown where he had his training partner Steve Lee and a couple of his buddies from high school, Kev and Eve. And they all just sat down and basically talked about the fights. Steve Lee is fucking hilarious. So I highly recommend checking that out. He is super funny. They discuss whether or not you get points for landing a slap. And yeah, it's just a fun episode where they hang out talking shit. He describes it as like kind of Fight Companion-esque, which, I mean, they're not watching fights, they're previewing a fight, but yeah, I get where he's coming from. They're just kind of hanging out, talking shit, drinking. So it was a fun one for sure. Heavy Hands had their bonus episode 45, which was titled K1 Maya 5000. Real good. They had a lot of talk about how Jake Shields is a way better striker than Ben Askren. And yeah, it's a fun one. Anakin Florian episode 223 was really solid. I actually really enjoyed this. I mentioned the new segment that they're doing where they do rapid fire of the prelim fights. I like that quite a bit. They also talked to Jeff Osborne about the UFC 244 bets. And yeah, a lot of shots at Askren in that podcast, which I kind of hinted at earlier, but weird. It's always weird when someone so closely associated with a promotion has a narrative that is friendly to the promotion's narrative. It's always kind of weird. But I don't know. Probably making too much out of it, but something to keep an eye on. And I think that's all Chris had. Let me pull up his text and make sure I'm not missing anything. Here, while I do that, I will say, for Well-Rounded podcast this week, for the non-MMA related stuff that's just, I enjoyed, Joe Rogan Experience, episode 1372 with Kevin Smith, was actually real good. I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith in general. I know he's kind of cheesy and he kind of, I don't know. Kevin Smith definitely like lives his gimmick a little bit, but I always enjoy podcasts with him. He reminds me a lot of Bert Kreischer. Just like happy to be everywhere. Seems like a very real dude. Met Kevin Smith way back in the day at Comic-Con. Super fucking nice guy. I actually had him sign a guitar pick because that's all I had on him. Or on me, and he was pretty excited about it, which was weird. But yeah, pretty cool. So it's cool hearing him on Rogan's podcast talking about how Rogan is evidently cousins with Gerard Way, which is fucking amazing. Can't wait for that Joe Rogan My Chemical Romance crossover project. It's gonna be fucking fire. Also, fucking Bert Kreischer has a new podcast. It's the dumbest. To be fair, It's a great fucking podcast. I don't know how they convinced Bill Burr to do this, but the Bill Burt podcast, episode 1, is really fucking good. They're hanging out smoking cigars. It looks like they're smoking Asylum 7x70s or 8x80s. They're huge fucking cigars. And it looked like it was an Asylum band on it. And, of course, Asylum is known for the giant, like, comical-sized cigars. I think they were probably 7x70s, but it's hard to gauge because you're having to gauge it against dudes' hands. And, like, I don't know the size of Bert's hands. It'd be weird if I did. So, I think they were 7x70s, but it could be 8x80s. Either way, they looked like Asylums, and it's a fucking... Imagine Bill Burr and Burt Kreischer hanging out smoking cigars. That's kind of what that podcast is like. And then the Giant Bomb Extra Life stream. So Giant Bomb, of course, the video game website, is doing their huge live stream that they do every year to raise money for charity through Extra Life, which is a kind of a project where everybody streams video games for 24 hours straight. Or I guess people stream for more than that. I don't know. I know Giant Bomb normally does 24 hours straight. So I believe last year, like it's like around 1 or 2 in the morning, Rory's just drinking like fucking peppered vodkas and getting all hammered. Shit gets weird. Oh, that was also where they played that fucking game. Oh God, what was the name of that? Oh, it was an Ubisoft game or a Ubisoft game where it was a silent protagonist, and it was the worst fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. Oh, God, I wish I could remember the name of it. Anyway, there's a lot of crazy shit that happens on those streams, so I'd recommend checking that out. And yeah, I think that's mostly what I had, so I will go ahead and wrap this segment here, and then you guys can listen to this clip of Jake Smith talking about how disrespectful it would be to have to fight Nate Diaz while he is just insulting you all mush-mouthed. So here, I will play that clip, and then when we come back, I am going to go through our picks for UFC 244. I did get Chris to send me his, and I will we'll break down this fucking card. I am hyped. I'm super fucking excited. So I am going to go take a shot of something. I don't know what. Maybe I'll try that Bayou rum. I got some Bayou rum from Bevmo, and I don't know what to make of it yet. Maybe I'll try that. Anyway, we'll be back in just a minute, and in the meantime, enjoy this clip.
Liked by the sound of violence.
When Nate does load up, boom, that's when everyone goes,
right, and just when he gets you to that point, starts fucking with you.
Yeah, he
starts
pointing,
slapping you,
pointing
at you, stepping in, just slapping you.
You know, no one knows what the fuck he's saying with that lisp and the mouth guard in his mouth.
Right?
Yeah, I'd be fucking mad. I'd be like, dude, you can't be talking shit in mush mouth. You can't do that. That's super disrespectful. You know, at least enunciate if you're gonna talk shit to me.
About it all.
Liked by the sound of violence.
What's funny is when a guy is way bigger, then he doesn't always know how to act. He's like, oh, should I be more gentle, less gentle? Oh, I don't really know. Instead of just treating it like, okay, I'm a little stronger than you, I'll be a little bit aware of that. It's not about the male-female thing, it's about the size disparity. But then when the guys are the same size as the women, not all of them. Okay, this is not everybody. There are some guys who are amazing training partners, and I am so grateful for them. But a lot of the guys who are the same size as the women, they kind of have ego problems, and they really don't want to be seen to be getting beat by a woman. So they only have two speeds. One is like, yeah, all right, cool, this isn't serious, to being like, oh shit, are you fucking me up? Like, 100%, let me go, And so, I think that progress is being made, and I think that a big part of it is just getting more women on the mats and having leaders inside of the gym who are like able to direct the training sessions in such a way that women aren't getting patronized, but they're not getting smashed either.
Liked by the sound of violence.
When Nate does load up, boom, that's when everyone goes,
Right, and just when he gets you to that point, starts fucking with you.
Yeah, he
starts
starts pointing,
slapping you,
pointing
at you, stepping in, just slapping you.
You know, no one knows what the fuck he's saying with that lisp and the mouth guard in his mouth.
Right?
Yeah, I'd be fucking mad. I'd be like, dude, you can't be talking shit in mush mouth. You can't do that. That's super disrespectful. You know, at least enunciate if you're gonna talk shit to me.
Are you excited about it all?
Liked by the sound of violence.
When Nate does load up, boom, that's when everyone goes,
Right, and just when he gets you to that point, starts fucking with you.
Yeah, he
starts
pointing,
slapping you,
pointing
at you, stepping in, just slapping you.
You know, no one knows what the fuck he's saying with that lisp and the mouth guard in his mouth.
Right?
Yeah, I'd be fucking mad. I'd be like, dude, you can't be talking shit in mush mouth. You can't do that. That's super disrespectful. You know, at least enunciate if you're gonna talk shit to me.
Are you excited about it all?
Liked by the sound of violence.
When Nate does load up, boom, that's when everyone goes,
right, and just when he gets you to that point, starts fucking with you.
Yeah, he
starts
pointing,
slapping you,
pointing
at you, stepping in, just slapping you.
You know, no one knows what the fuck he's saying with that lisp and the mouth guard in his mouth.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be fucking mad. I'd be like, dude, you can't be talking shit in mush mouth. You can't do that. That's super disrespectful. You know, at least enunciate if you're gonna talk shit to me.
Are you excited about it all?
All right, we are back. I should have mentioned at the top, but Judo Bill brought it up in chat. Not running any video today, mostly because I didn't want to have to completely change my fucking OBS streaming setup. And also, really, you're not missing much by looking at me while I'm talking on this one. So, you're just going to be looking at me looking at a screen. So, we will be back on video next week. Since I didn't have Chris with me, I didn't want to have to do a whole new fucking streaming setup and try and figure that out in time to get this out. So we're going to go ahead and break down this UFC 244 card. Hands down, the most stacked card of the year. It's not even fucking close. And I'm real excited about this. I just realized I need to pull up best fight odds, since I am running this whole motherfucking show. Alright. So I do know that this card is pretty evenly fucking matched just off the bookings, but I have been seeing a couple different places throughout the week people saying that the odds are pretty dead even across the board. I think the biggest favorite is Gaslam at minus 225. Yeah, Gaslam and Burgos, it looks like. So definitely, this would be a fun card to put together a couple parlays or a couple prop bets, excuse me. So we are going to go ahead and get into this card. I'm super fucking hyped. I should mention, though, before we start, that I am... Oh, you probably heard me set that down. I should not have set that on there. I am drinking what might be the worst named hazy IPA of all time. So I've had Black Plague Brewing's beers on the podcast before. I think I had their Mexican lager, and I had a different one as well, if I remember right. But they, like everyone else, has a hazy IPA, and they, like everyone else, are running out of puns for hazies. So this is the Hellhazer. It's evidently a limited run because they literally have the fucking dude with the pinhead. I don't think he's actually... Is he called Pinhead? Because that's offensive nowadays, right? It's the dude, it's the Hellraiser guy. There's a picture of him on the fucking can holding a hazy beer. So I believe this is a super limited run that they're not going to do again. It looks like a hazy. Super fruity though. Ooh, that's not bad. It's a little bitter for my taste. When it comes to hazy IPAs, prefer them like a little bit juicier, but really clean, dry finish. Yeah, that's good. Like some pineapple, definitely some tropical fruits. I dig it for sure. Also, shouts out to Judo Bill, who I don't know if he's still in chat, but if I'm waiting for one of the kids at the party he's at to fall off trampoline, and I'm gonna laugh my ass off. Because that's all trampolines are good for is injuries, right? I feel like nothing good came from trampolines. Who was it that I heard recently talk about how they used to fight on trampolines? There's a fighter in the UFC that used to fight his friends on trampolines on the regs. And that's a fucking ridiculous ass statement. So, anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into this card. Holy shit. We'll get to it when we get to that fight, but I just found out who Edmund Shabazian was supposed to fight originally. And I did not know that, but that would have been a dope fucking fight. Alright, so we will start off at the bottom. Since I am running this solo and I am having to go through... Chris texted me his picks. Oh, actually, shit, before we start, Chris did get back to me about the Smoke Weed and Talk MMA podcast. I asked him, what do you think of the show? He said he thought it was a lot of... hold on. He said he thought a lot of it was insightful when they were talking fights, but honestly couldn't care for the weed talk, which is that's why I like having Chris as a co-host, because me and him have we definitely have some overlap in our taste, but I loved all the weed talk. Maybe it's because I love weed podcasts for a decade plus now. But yeah, no, their fight insight was great. And they brought up the fact that Nate was able to avoid arbitration by making the statement. And honestly, I didn't hear anyone else bring that up. And they did that a couple times throughout that episode. So definitely worth checking out. Judo Bill says he's trying to tire his kids out on the trampoline so they even won during the fights. That's probably a good idea because there's going to be a whole lot of swearing in the main event, I have a feeling. Unless you want your kids to hear Nate Diaz call Jorge a bitch 45 times. They should probably try and, yeah, probably the way to go about it. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start off the bottom of the card and work our way up. Chris, as I said, texted me his picks. So I will be rattling off his as well. He didn't give me methods. He just sent me the fucking classic circle the winner on the Instagram post, which evidently was a paid partnership with Van Hoosen style, according to the thing he sent me. So, starting off at the bottom of the card. Oh, so full disclosure, as you heard in the rant I did about ESPN Plus earlier, I didn't do a lot of tape study for this card, but I'm super familiar with everybody who's fighting, so I am full disclosure on that one. But I'm fucking extremely excited for this card. This is hands down the best card of the year. It's not even close. I don't even off the top of my head know who, like, there's a couple, I forget the card during the summer that was pretty stacked, but no card has had stacked prelims like this card. It's fucking ridiculous. So starting off, we got Julio Arce taking on Hakeem Dawodu. Mean Hakeem, as Dan Tom likes to call. By the way, if you guys are sleeping on Dan Tom's breakdowns on the Protect Your Neck podcast, you really shouldn't. They're fucking ridiculous. Dan Tom has maybe the all-time greatest nickname giving gimmick around. As well, we'll get to Bulgoy even off here in a minute, but it's underrated for sure. And that was me dropping my phone because I'm a little buzzed. So we got Julio. This is hard doing it solo. It's been a while. So Julio Arce is coming off the win over Julian Erosa, where he won via head kick in the third round. Prior to that, he had the split decision loss to Shane Moraes. Fucking no shame. And that was a competitive as fuck fight, too. And then prior to that, he had the win over Daniel Tamer via RNC and Dan Ige via decision. Jesus. That is a tough lineup. Hakeem Dawodu fighting out of, what the fuck? Champions Creed Martial Arts? Is that still where he fights out of? What the fuck is Champions Creed Martial Arts? Okay, it's some Canadian gym. Weird. Man. So I've been going back and forth on this one quite a bit as well. Julio Arce, I think, will probably have the sharper hands in this fight. But man, Hakeem Dawodu's looked so good. Of course, he's coming off the win over Yoshinori Hori, which Hori was pretty, like, that's a tougher matchup than it was given credit for. But really, the win over Kyle Bochniak and Austin Arnett are the two that really stood out to me. Plus, he has that win over Steven Siler back in WSOF in 2017. Judo Bill saying he's actually going to buy the card. It's so good. Yeah, I'm thinking about going over to Chris's for it. Although I'm going to be pretty drunk by then, so unless I can convince girlfriend Karen to drive, maybe not. But I'm excited for this card for sure. So in this fight, I'm leaning Dawodu a little bit, but man, I don't know. If Julio Arce can get his hands going early and can time some of the kicks of Dawodu, I think he can absolutely make this super goddamn tough. Also, his grappling probably should not be slept on. Hakeem Dawodu's looked pretty sharp, but Julio Arce is he's shown he can outshine some dudes. I mean, to be fair, Daniel Tamer, not exactly a world-class competition, but still an impressive win and did get the sub. So I'm leaning Dawodu by decision. I think this will probably be a pretty competitive fight. Fairly back and forth, but I'm just barely leaning Dawodu by decision. I think a lot of this fight is going to come down to the first couple minutes and whether Julio can find his range and start just putting on pressure and volume. So I'm gonna take Dawodu by decision, but as with most of the fights on this card, not super confident either way. Also, you got to excuse me because I am also typing in our picks as we're doing this, and I don't have Chris to cover for me and read lines. So it's going to be, it'll be interesting to see how well I'm able to do this as I get progressively drunker. Because it's fucking November, y'all. Oh, that's right. Judo Bill's probably drinking again. Hey, Judo Bill, how's the booze and weed going? I bet that's going way better. Pro tip, if you're doing Sober October, don't stop smoking weed. That's the wrong way to do Sober October. Looks like Chris is also taking Duadu. I would assume by decision. Julio Arce, I think, is too tough to get put away. Unless he really gets clipped with a head kick or something. But I think this is probably going to be a scrappy decision. So, yeah. Should be a fun one for sure. Odds on that fight. What fucking bookie do we normally reference? I think we normally do we normally reference 5 Dimes or Bovada? Oh no, you know what? I think Chris says Bet DSI because they sponsor Punch Drunk. So we'll do that. So according to that site I just mentioned that I'm not going to mention again because, well, whatever. We don't have sponsorships on this fucking show. The show's the opposite of a sponsor. I just buy shit and then shout it out on the show. It's like a negative sponsorship. Hakeem Dawodu, according to them, is a minus 132 to a plus 109 underdog of Julio Arce. It sounds about right. This, like many of the fights on the card, is super competitive. So I am curious to see how it goes. Oh my god, typing and doing all this at the same time is not going to make this any easier on me. Okay. So Lyman Good is taking on Chance for Encounter. Unfortunately, I heard on the MMA Vivisection. Fuck! I forgot to shout out the MMA Vivisection as shows that you should have caught this week. I guess it would be an honorable mention, to be fair. But MMA Vivisection was very good for UFC 244. And they mentioned that Chance Rencounter has a DV conviction, so that's not great. Certainly not helping me Certainly not helping me root for Chance Rencounter. A lot of Tiger Schulman guys on the card, which makes sense because it's in the East Coast area at a MSG. Also, man, a lot of these guys have been getting big fucking fights. Forgot Lyman Good's last 3 fights were Demian Maia, Ben Saunders, and Elijah Zaleski dos Santos. That is a crazy run. So Lyman Good, the Cyborg, not a great nickname, is taking on Chance Rencounter. Chance Rencounter, who am I confusing Chance Rencounter with? Holy shit, that is not who I thought Chance Rencounter is. Like, I recognize him now that I see him. But who's the dude with, like, Thug Money? Is it Thug Money that he has tatted on him that's from the Contender Series? There's a black dude from the Contender Series that I thought was Chance Rencounter. It's clearly not. I forgot that Chance Rencounter just recently took on Nardiev. Great fucking fight. Mostly won it with top control from what I remember. Before that, he had the win over Kyle Stewart and the decision loss to Bilal Muhammad. Zero fucking shame. Bilal is, as I've said on this podcast since I saw him fighting Titan back in forever ago, Bilal is a monster, especially when he gets going. Man, this really changes this. So, I was originally leaning towards Lyman Good pretty heavily, but that's when I thought I knew who Chance Rencounter is. Now that I remember who Chance Rencounter is, man, I mean, this comes down to, can Chance get Lyman Good down enough to win rounds? I don't think he can. I think Lyman Good hits pretty fucking hard, and it's just a tough dude to deal with. But as a counter argument, if the 2 dudes you put away are Andrew Craig and Ben Saunders, while, yes, Lyman Good is absolutely a bad motherfucker, those are dudes you should be putting away at the level, and the comparative level in both people's careers at this point. Artur Potamian? Sure, I'm going to go ahead and butcher the shit out of that. You can probably watch the early stream the stream for the early prelims on ESPN Plus, I believe, which starts in 2.5 hours, a little less than that. I think that's where I think it's ESPN Plus for the early streams or the early prelims. You guys tell I'm getting a little drunk? My tolerance is trash now that October is over. I'm not even gonna lie. It's a fine balance between being pretty sober and completely blacked out. It's a very fine line. It's like a 2-shot difference right now, which is not. That sounds like a lot. It's not a lot. Masvidal, yeah, ESPN Plus at 3:15 p.m. is the prelim card, and then the prelims after that go to ESPN 2, then back to ESPN Plus for the pay-per-view. So let's see. Chance ring count. Oh, did I say I'm taking Lyman Good? I'm taking Lyman Good. I guess I'm taking Lyman Good. Shit. Now that I look at this, I think I have to take him by stoppage because I don't think he wins a decision. I think he probably loses a decision to like 29-28. Shit. Because I think Chance Ringcounter is probably going to take the third round. It's a matter of how much Lyman Good can piece him up in the first two. So I'm going to lean Lyman Good via, I guess, TKO first. But I don't know. He got backed up against Cage pretty goddamn badly against Damian Maia, which is not like he basically walked straight backwards to the cage when that fight started, and then got RNC'd quickly after. Shit, actually, I'm gonna take ring counter by decision, aren't I? I don't feel good about it. I'd feel a lot better if he didn't have a DV case on him. Shit. Yeah, okay. I'll take a ring counter by decision, but I don't feel good at all. In fact, I feel a little dirty about it. I'm not going to lie. Let's see. What did Chris have? Chris has ring counter. I don't know if he just looked at Tapology, realized dude is an alliance fighter, and picked ring counter. Super possible. But I'm gonna go that way. What are the odds looking like? I gotta imagine Rencounter's probably a favorite. No, slight underdog. According to that one website that I'm not going to mention, but that sponsors Punch Drunk Sports, Lyman Good is a minus 118 to a plus 103 of Chance Rencounter. Yeah, I mean it's a super pick'em. That is a coin flip ass fight if I've ever seen one. Actually, speaking of which, so is this next fight, which I'm actually much more excited for. I think this will be one of the more fun fights on the card, depending on how much Jennifer Maia brings it to Caitlin Chukagian. So Chooks is coming off the win over Joanne Calderwood. We'll call it a win. It's a win on the record books. Joanne, I believe, landed more strikes in that fight by the numbers, but that doesn't always mean much. But we'll get to Chooks. But yeah, she's coming off the win over Joanne Calderwood, the split decision loss to Jessica Ai, which, man, that shit happens. And then Alexis Davis, she has the decision win over, as well as Mauro Romero Barella and Irene Aldana, which looks, actually, Jesus Christ, Caitlin Chukagian's record, as time goes on, is looking better and goddamn better. Like, she has some very, Jesus, is that KGB also that she has in her amateur? Jesus, you know what? I just turned a corner right now. Man, so Caitlin Chukagian is beat. In her amateur days, Andrea KGB Lee. I'm just mentioning people who are big names who you'd recognize. She has a win over Melinda Fabian. She has a win over Sajari Eubanks. She has a win over Lauren Murphy. She has a split decision loss to Liz Carmouche. She has a win over Irene Aldana. She has a win over Mauro Romero Barella, Alexis Davis. Split decision loss to Jessica Ai, and a win over Joanne Calderwood. So volume at air and key eyes will absolutely win you some goddamn rounds, evidently. Man, that is... I know her run's been pretty solid. The problem is she has so much of that Holly Holm, like, nothing volume that it's hard for me to take her unless she's fighting someone who's just going to walk on to damage. And even then, she lost that split decision to Jessica Ai, who is like... Jessica Ai is the exact example that I'm talking about of someone who will just pressure forward and walk through damage. Liz Carmouche, same kind of thing. I mean, Valentina fight excluded, but... she's taking on Jennifer Maia. I've been very, very high on Jennifer Maia since her Invicta run. Jennifer Maia is coming off the win over Roxanne Modafferi. Before that, she had the win over Alexis Davis, the loss via decision to Liz Carmouche, and then she had wins over Agnieszka Niedzwiecz and another win over Roxy, Vanessa Porto. I mean, these are some big goddamn names who have been looking very good, and her only losses are decisions to Liz Carmouche, Deanna Bennett, Leslie Smith. She had a 10-second knockout loss to Sheila Gaff, which I have to imagine was a questionable ref decision. She had a loss of Vanessa Porto back in 2011, a draw with Kalinda Faria back in 2010. Like, that is high goddamn level competition. Man, this is such a good fight. I'm extremely excited for this. I think the question is going to come down to how much is Jennifer Maia going to come forward and how much is Caitlin Chookagian going to be able to work behind key eyes and strikes at distance. If Jennifer Maia can put her on the cage and rack up strikes there and just generally stay on her, I think it will, number one, make the fight way more fun. But number two, I think it will favor Jennifer Maia. The only thing I'm worried about is Chookagian will win scorecards off of sound and strikes thrown, not strikes landed. I feel like I'm being hard on Caitlin Chookagian. I do think she is very underrated, but she just puts out so much volume. And I believe she's Mark Henry. I'm pretty goddamn positive, although Tapology is not doing me any favors right now. Man, this is a really hard pick. I'm gonna lean... Man. My instinct... Here, let me walk you through my thought process right now. So my instinct is to take Maia. But not because I feel like the smart pick is Caitlin Chookagian because I just sound like key eyes and volume are a real good way to steal a scorecard, especially in the women's divisions, as proven by Holly Holm over and fucking over again. Man, yeah, okay. I want to take Jennifer Maia. I just don't think the judge is going to get this right, even if she does win. Shit. Yeah, I'm going to take Chookagian. God damn it. I'm not happy about it. I don't necessarily think Chookagian will even win the fight. I just don't have enough faith in the judges to not give a... I think this is 100% going to decision. And it's going to be a very tough decision win for Jennifer Maia. Unless she is just clearly pot-shotting and picking apart Chookagian as well as beating her up in the clinch. I think a lot of this is going to come down to, can Jennifer Maia push a clinch game against someone who rarely engages? Also, it should be noted, I forgot, Maia did blow weight by a pound or so. So while I normally would think that would favor Maia, and I think it will, especially again in the clinch exchanges, I just don't have faith in judges understanding the difference between strikes thrown and strikes landed with someone like Caitlin Chookagian, especially in New York, especially since Doug Crosby is probably going to be on that fucking panel. Maybe not for this fight, but that's something to be very wary of, is any decisions that Doug Crosby is possibly involved with could be completely fucked. Also, just New York cards in general, I feel like, have had some very questionable decisions. So something to keep an eye on. Up next, man, we have a fight that, like, I'm going to do this. Oh, here, actually, let me go. The odds on that, according to the Punch Drunk sponsor, is minus 145 for Chooks to a plus 125 Jennifer Maya. Yeah, I feel like it's really the without the key eyes, I don't think Chookagian would win nearly as cleanly as she does. But man, it works. I guess you can't hate on it, right? It's the same thing Holly Holm did against Raquel Pennington and a whole fucking bunch of people. So, I don't know. Andrei Arlovski, the Pitbull, 28-18, coming off the win over Ben Rothwell via decision. Before that, he had split decision loss to Augusto Sakai, the no contest to Walt Harris, and the decision losses to Taito Ivasa and Shamil Abdurahimov. Taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who Rozenstruik is looking like a goddamn monster, to be fair. He demolished Alan Crowder and Junior Albini. Not even fucking close. Dude is very green. Just like, compared to, I mean, that's the thing with heavyweight, though, is I just don't know how the fuck to treat it, especially with green fighters. Like, what if Andrei Arlovski just shoots for takedowns? Like, I believe he would get every takedown he shot for. Or at least, like, have ugly enough exchanges to get into the clinch and then just pin Rozenstruik against the cage and punch him a whole bunch. Which sometimes Andrei Arlovski's done throughout his career. Andre also looked real good against Ben Rothwell, who Ben Rothwell also looked not so good. So I kind of don't know what to make of either one of them. I'm obviously taking Rozenstruik pretty cleanly. I think he probably... I was going to say I think he gets a knockout, but when the fuck... Last time Arlovski was knocked out was in Ngannou in 2017. So, like, I don't fucking know, man. Rozenstruik hits fucking hard. He's crazy athletic. He won with a goddamn jab and ground and pound in 9 seconds in his last fight. Yeah. I'm taking Rozenstruik just for the athletic advantage and the age difference. So, Rozenstruik, I would imagine, is a solid. Yeah, he's a pretty solid favorite. Minus 147 to plus 127. Andrei Arlovski. If this fight was not a heavyweight, I probably would not be nearly as certain about it, which I don't... Maybe that's misguided because I feel like Jairzinho is also the kind of dude who we might just find out he has zero wrestling if you get him down, or like zero ground game. Like he could absolutely have Taito Ivasa tendencies to just like punch from mounted position kind of shit. But I'm gonna take Jairzinho TKO in the first. Not super confident though. Let's look at odds. Odds on this one are minus 147 for Rozenstruik against plus 127 for Andrei Arlovski. That sounds about right. Let's see. I forgot to give Chris's picks for the last two. Chris has Chooks. I'm gonna go ahead and say by decision, knowing how that fight's gonna go. And he has Arlovski. I'm also going to say probably by decision. So that's actually pretty interesting. I'm curious. He's got to think that Arlovski is going to just be able to outlast Jairzinho's early flurry and kind of give him problems late, I would imagine. Chris had talked about doing a recap. We'll maybe try and do that this week if we have time. So that way we can kind of get his retrospective take on his picks and all that. All right, we'll keep on moving on. Another great fucking fight, which, man, as great as Brad Tavares versus Edmund Shabazian is, I kind of really would have liked to see Jocko versus Shabazian. I think that's such a fucking fun fight. Just style matchup wise. Brad Tavares, I'm high on Brad Tavares. I also don't know what to make of Brad Tavares at this point in his career. Like, I was very sure about where Brad Tavares, as Eugene S. Robinson would say, I was very sure about where his place in time and space was. And then after that Izzy fight, it definitely altered how I view Izzy, but I don't know necessarily where Brad Tavares is at. And against a dude like Edmund Shabazian, another guy who I don't necessarily know where his skill set is at outside of just getting on top of dudes and pounding them out. I mean, a win over Jack Marshman, while good, Jack Marshman, not known for great takedown defense. As a matter of fact, he's kind of known for not having great takedown defense. The Charles Byrd fight was more impressive. Charles Byrd has looked solid on the ground. Darren Stewart, definitely well-rounded. Early finishes make these kind of stuff hard because I don't put much weight behind the Charles Byrd and Jack Marshman fight. So I'm going to take Brad Tavares in this. I don't have enough faith in Shabazian's takedown game. I haven't lost enough faith in Brad Tavares' takedown defense to not give Brad Tavares this fight. Brad Tavares is definitely I would say he's definitely a better counter wrestler than he is a offensive wrestler, which I think kind of led to some of the problems in the fight against Izzy. He also, though, it should be noted, didn't really go for many takedown or clinch exchanges against Izzy. A lot of that fight took place at range with him getting jabbed up. I do think Edmund's immediately going to try and push pace, get takedowns. I think that is going to wear on Edmund as time goes on, because even if he does get Brad Tavares down, Brad Tavares is pretty good at getting back to his feet, and I think he'll be able to stuff a good amount of the takedowns. So I'm going to lean towards Tavares by decision to probably take the last 2 rounds. He generally looks better as fights go on anyway, and so I'm going to lean that way. But if Edmund Shabazian gets him down in the first 3 minutes or so of the first round, 3-4 minutes, I think it's going to be fucking trouble for Tavares. Because I think if he can get that train rolling and kind of get that momentum going, I think it's going to build. But if he also, it could also work the other way, where if he starts consistently getting takedowns stuffed and just getting stuck in clinch exchanges where Brad Tavares turns him, separates, and he has to repeat the whole process, I think that shit can wear on him pretty quickly. Especially with the amount of effort Edmund Shabazian puts in. That dude goes hard all the goddamn time, and I would not necessarily be surprised to see him flag late, although we haven't really seen it. I keep waiting for Edmund Shabazian to get tired, and Edmund Shabazian does not seem to get tired, so I don't know. I'm leaning that way, but I'm not super confident. It looks like Chris is taking Shabazian. I'm guessing by decision, I would assume. I do not know, though. So that'll be interesting. I'm actually, like with most of these fights, I'm extremely excited about him, but that's a fun style matchup, and it'll tell us a lot about where both those dudes are at in their careers. Because I feel like this is a big statement for both of them to make, depending on how it goes. Edmund Shabazian looks like he is a, minus 152 favorite currently to a plus 130 Brad Tavares. I would say that probably sounds right. Like, Edmund, the odds Edmund takes 2 rounds just off enough top control, or just like grindy clinch work is super possible. So, god damn, this card is stacked. By the way, that could have been a main card on most of these goddamn regional shows that we've been watching that the UFC's been putting out. And this next one is absolutely main card material as well. Shane Burgos and Makwan Amirkhani. Super fucking fun fight. 2 dudes who are just coming to show the fuck up. Another Tiger Schulman guy also in Shane Burgos. Also, I'm going to take a sip of beer. I feel like I have to announce when I'm sipping beer so that I don't have the Ariel Helwani 4 minutes of silence. Alright. So Shane Burgos coming off the solid win over Cub Swanson Also had the armbar over Kurt Holloway. And before that, he had the loss to Calvin Kattar via punches in the third round. Been on a hell of a run, though. Like some really, really big wins. And he has taken on Makwan Amirkhani, who still has one of the most ridiculous topology pictures outside of Nikita Krylov. He is still training at SBG in Ireland, I believe. And he got that really, really impressive win over Chris Fishgold. That was a big, big win in my book. I did not have him taking Chris. I don't believe I had. I think I had Chris Fishgold in that fight. But for him to catch the Anaconda on Chris is super impressive, in my opinion. Also, he had that split decision win over Jason Knight, and then the split decision loss to Arnold Allen. Two very tough dudes, and definitely no easy outs. Here's the thing, though. Shane Burgos is a fucking banger, and he's going to come in and throw fucking hands and put pressure on. And I don't know that... I think Makwan's going to fade in this fight, to be honest. I don't think he's going to be able to handle the pace and the pressure. I don't think he's going to like the game plan he has to face. Shane Burgos is just going to walk forward and throw fucking heaters, long combos, and make this ugly as shit. Just really get in Makwan's face. A lot of this comes down to, can Makwan Amirkhani get the takedown? And I don't... Even if he can, I'm not convinced he can get the takedown and either finish on top early or keep that pace going throughout the fight. So I'm going to take Shane Burgos via probably... I was going to say TKO, but I'm probably going to take him via decision. I think Shane Burgos could possibly drop. It kind of depends on what Makwan's game plan is. If Makwan comes out wrestling hard early, Burgos could drop the first. If Makwan ends up slowly building throughout time, he could take the third. I'm just not convinced either way that he's not going to eat some big damage from Shane Burgos and have trouble over time. So I'm going to take Shane Burgos to bang his way to a win over Makwan Amirkhani via decision. And let's see. It looks like Chris has taken Burgos as well. Which, yeah, I feel like Burgos is the pick on this one. I have also, though, I will readily admit that I feel like I've pretty consistently been sleeping on Makwan Amirkhani. Like I do most SBG guys. I just have trouble. Unless I think the SBG guy is going to win via a counterpunch in the first round, I have trouble picking him. There's exceptions, especially with some of the grapplers who are, I would argue, much more talented out of those gyms. A lot of the strikers, which I think the vivisection actually touched on, a lot of the strikers out of SBG basically wait for a counter left. Like, a lot of them. That and a check hook. And I'm just not convinced that Makwan Amirkhani is not going to drop at least two of those rounds off of volume and like getting takedowns maybe, but not doing much with them. So I'm going to take Burgos via decision, but this whole card makes me nervous. Burgos, wow, holy shit. Burgos is a minus 222 favorite to a plus 177 Makwan Amirkhani. That's bonkers. I would put that nowhere near that amount. I would think it like maybe minus 177 to like a plus 130 or 140, maybe. But like, Jesus, that seems way too wide. You can get Makwan as high as plus 205, which seems kind of fucking crazy. I guess people are saying the same thing I am, which is that Makwan's gonna have trouble implementing his top game. But man, I don't know. I don't know about that line. All right, moving on. God damn, more fights that could be headliners of smaller cards. Corey Anderson, overtime, beast of 25-8. Any of the names you want to assign to him. He is taking on Johnny Walker. So Corey Anderson's coming off the decision win over Ilir Latifi. Before that, he had the decision win over Glover Teixeira and the decision win over Patrick Cummins. Before that, he had the losses via head kick and or punch to OSP and Jimmy Manoa. Johnny Walker, coming off a string of crazy first-round finishes, which was followed by him injuring the shit out of his shoulder by doing the worm. And Johnny Walker's competition has actually aged pretty fucking well. Misha Serkinov, he hit the flying knee and punches in 36 seconds in. Justin Ledet, he hit him with a hook kick 15 seconds in. Khalil Roundtree hit with an elbow a minute and 57 seconds in. And then he had the decision win over Luis Enrique da Silva. This fight comes down to, does Johnny Walker get out, or does Corey Anderson get out of the first round, right? If Corey Anderson gets out of the first round, I think he wins this fight. Because that means he's probably implementing his wrestling. It means he probably didn't get caught with it. Well, it means he didn't get caught with anything crazy early. And yeah, as a result, if you guys listen to the show, you know I lean heavily on wrestlers anyway. But yeah, I'm taking Corey Anderson. I don't have any faith that Johnny Walker is not just going to get put on his back and beat the fuck up like he was against, I said Fabiano Scherner earlier, didn't I? Not Fabiano Scherner. Who the fuck am I thinking of? Wagner Prado. Maybe I did say Wagner Prado. I'm blending names together in my head. Anyway, very long time ago, it was in 2014. It was a much younger Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker got just dominated on the ground. And we haven't really seen him on the ground in the UFC. At least not against higher level competition. Luis Enrique da Silva is about the highest level grappler he's fought. Well, that's not true. He's the highest level grappler he's fought that didn't get murdered in the first minute. I don't have faith that Johnny Walker has anything after 5 minutes. I believe he is probably very similar to Michel Pereira, who I like Michel Pereira. I like Johnny Walker. I loved the Johnny Walker interview that he did with Mike Quick Swick on his podcast a while back. Johnny Walker seems like a great dude. I don't have any faith that if he gets wrestled, he has any answer for it. And no part, to be fair to him, we haven't had to see any of his wrestling game because he's just been murdering people. But yeah, I gotta take Anderson via decision just because I don't know. I still don't know what to make of Johnny Walker. And until that time, I can't just take him off of pretense that he just murders everybody in the first minute. I generally have trouble picking dudes who go on those kinds of runs anyway. So yeah, I'm going to Corey Anderson via decision. Possibly drop the first round, depending on how the wrestling goes, but definitely take the second and third. Maybe put him away, depending on how dominant Anderson is on top. People sleep on how hard Corey Anderson's ground and pound is. He's had some nasty fucking, I don't remember if it was one of his last couple fights where he was just smashing dude from on top. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but yeah, I'm leaning hard on Corey Anderson in this one. Unless Johnny Walker just murders him in a minute, which, to be fair, is super possible. Let's see who Chris has. Chris has Johnny Walker. Yeah, to be fair, I would not be surprised. So I'm guessing he has Walker via KO in the first. If I was to take a wild guess on that one, can't imagine he has him by decision. So that should be a fun one. Let's look at the odds. Odds on that one. Johnny Walker is a minus 169 favorite to a plus 141 Corey Anderson. I see why. They've definitely had different runs as of recently. Or as of late, rather. But, yeah, I can't put enough faith in early knockouts like that. Kevin Lee is taking on Gregor Gillespie, which I am fucking so high on this fight. Here, actually, I'll read you guys Chris's comments about this, since he did text me. He says the toughest one for him to pick besides the main event was Lee versus Gregor, considering Kevin Lee is expected to look like GS Lee. However, it looked like he had staph on his chest during the weigh-in, and that shit worries the fuck out of me. So Kevin Lee's coming off the loss to RDA and the loss to Ally Quinta. Before that, he had the win over Edson Barbosa in the 5th round, which was a crazy fucking fight. Gregor Gillespie has been doing the worst social media posting I've ever seen in my life. That's not true, but it's definitely up there. He's coming off of wins over Yancy Medeiros via ground and pound in the 2nd, which, Jesus Christ, that's impressive. And before that, he fought Vince Pichel, Jordan Rinaldi, and Jason Gonzalez. So, I am having trouble picking this one. I believe I touched on it earlier, but I've been going back and forth, and I really still... My question is, does Kevin Lee fade after 6 or 7 minutes? I'll say 7 minutes. Because I think it's going to be around 7 minutes in that he flags pretty hard if he does indeed have a staph infection. What up, Chihuahua, or Little Chihuahua? Fucking, I have like 18 little Chihuahuas running around this place, I feel like, so... Yeah, man. My instinct is to take Kevin Lee. However, my instinct has been to take Kevin Lee in the last couple of Kevin Lee's fights, and that shit has not worked out for me. The question is, Kevin Lee definitely has a size advantage in this fight. Does Gregor Gillespie, is he a big enough 55er, and how bad is the staff / weight cut for Kevin Lee? And man, that is a rough gamble on a dude who's been flagging in fights late. Jesus, I'm now realizing I think I'm taking Gregor Gillespie, and that fucking bums me out because I really like Kevin Lee a lot. Like I think if this fight happened a year from now, I think Kevin Lee might take it. I mean, here's a crazy fact: I think Kevin Lee is like 5 years younger than Gregor Gillespie. Yeah. Literally 5 years younger than Gregor Gillespie, which is insane. I think people sleep on how young Kevin Lee is, and I think we're going to see big things out of Kevin Lee. I don't know if we're going to see Firas Zahabi's game plan show up in this first fight, because he's still pretty new at that gym, and a lot of time there's an adjustment period. It seems like he's getting along with everybody super well. I just think this is a tough matchup, especially combined with the recent camp change. I want to take Kevin Lee so bad. Like, I feel like Kevin Lee could absolutely end up on top and get a sub early. However, if Kevin Lee gets the back and then loses the back, he has had some legit, like, Henry Hoof, Hard Knocks 365 style drop-offs when they lose a dominant position, especially with this back. That's something that Aljo and Ally Quinto both talked about on podcasts, where Kevin Lee, as soon as he loses that dominant control, just fucking falls off a cliff. And that's something I think that working with someone like Firas is going to seriously help. I just don't know if it'll be in this fight. Shit, so I guess I'm taking Gregor. I did not think going into this I was going to take Gregor, but I'm going to take Gregor by decision. I think he probably takes the 2nd and 3rd round. That's crazy. I honestly was planning on picking Lee going into this, but I think a lot of it comes down to the staff comment that Chris made. Because if he does have staff, that's going to fuck his cardio bad. And for someone who already has had pretty consistent cardio issues, and with all the weight class changes, I think that's going to be tough. This next fight, this next John fight, Derek Lewis is taking on Blagoy, I like boy, Ivanov, as Dan Tom likes to say, which is the best worst nickname in MMA. Oh, that was a terrible noise. Evidently people are moving things over at my place. Oh my god, that's awful. Derek Lewis coming off the loss to Junior Dos Santos and Daniel Cormier, 2 fights in which he expressed he had massive back issues going into both of them. He's taking on Blagoy Ivanov, who's coming off the win over Taito Ivasa and Ben Rothwell. That's an awful noise. Yeah, I'm leaning Blagoy Ivanov in this. I like Derek Lewis. If I was to pick a top 10 list of favorite fighters currently in the UFC, he is absolutely going to be on that list just off of his jokes alone. And his fights are always fun as hell. I think he can absolutely catch Blagoy if Blagoy just leaves himself open or gets too desperate trying to push takedowns. However, I just don't have faith that Derek Lewis is going to stuff takedowns. If this was a 5-round fight, I would probably take Derek Lewis by fucking crazy knockout very late into the fight. I just think Blagoy's going to... I think the pressure and the cage control, especially probably in the clinch, is going to be a problem. Also, body work is always something to keep an eye on with Derek Lewis, who's been shown to be pretty susceptible to the body. And Blagoy coming out of AKA, and just in general, he's been pretty good at working the body. So I'm going to take Blagoy via decision. But I'd be happy to see Derek Lewis win. Derek Lewis, a fucking national treasure as far as I'm concerned. Let's see. Chris has Derek Lewis in this one. I'm guessing via knockout because it's Derek Lewis. And the odds, it looks like the odds on this one, wow, this is super fucking even. Derek Lewis is a minus 102 underdog to a minus 120 Blagoy Ivanov. Yeah, that is the perfect heavyweight line for that fight. It just is a matter of, can Derek Lewis land a bomb, or can Blagoy Ivanov make it a rugged 3-round fight? Man, more crazy matchups that could be headliners. This could absolutely headline fucking Fortaleza, Brazil, or some shit. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson coming off the loss to Anthony Pettis and Darren Till back-to-back. Actually, sorry about that. Coming off the loss to Anthony Pettis and the win over Darren Till that he was fucking robbed of. He also has the win over Jorge Masvidal and Tyron Woodley. And he's taking on Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque is coming off the win over via split decision over Mike Perry in a goddamn bloodbath. Before that, he had the KO of Derek Krantz and the TKO of Brian Barberena. Man. Have I ever picked Wonderboy? I don't know that I've ever picked Wonderboy in a fight. Honestly. Nah. Yeah. Maybe over... No, I think I have Masvidal. Yeah, I don't think I've taken Stephen Thompson in a fight. So I'm gonna be honest. I don't think I'm taking Stephen Thompson in a fight here either. I think Vicente Luque is gonna be a problem for Stephen Thompson. The one thing to keep an eye on is if Wonderboy has... I think he probably will have the speed advantage, and he definitely throws crisper strikes. I think a lot of it's going to come down to... Yeah, actually, Lil Chihuahua in the chat nailed it. 100% Thompson is good, but Thompson is also getting up there in age pretty fucking quickly. What is he right now? 36 to Vicente Luque, who's 27. I think that's going to be a lot. I think the speed advantage, while it may be on Wonderboy's side, I just don't... I've never been 100% sold on Wonderboy's style. Like, all the hands down and out karate bullshit. I mean, maybe it's just because I prefer wrestling backgrounds and stuff. But, yeah, I'm leaning Luque for sure in this. So, I'm going to take Vicente Luque. Boy. I'm going to go decision, probably. I don't know. Stephen Thompson's pretty fucking hard to put away. And, like, while he's gotten banged on by a couple dudes, he also is just shown to be durable as shit, even in bad moments. Like, the Tyron Woodley fights, he got smashed by Tyron Woodley, but we're still able to survive every one of them, which is pretty goddamn wild. I think Pettis was the first person to ever actually put him out, if I remember right, which is crazy. Jesus Christ, I forgot he... Wait, no, that's not the same Matt Brown. Is that the same Matt Brown? Oh, that's right, Matt Brown. Oh my God, I forgot about that fight where Matt Brown almost killed him. Holy shit, that was a long time ago. 2012. Yeah. I just don't have faith in Thompson to be able to avoid big damage. And I think Vicente Luque is definitely going to have the volume advantage as well. Plus, if Vicente Luque tries to push a takedown game, or at least just a clinch grappling game, I think he can probably win that as well. I think this will be a big statement for where both of them are at in their careers. So it'll be interesting, but I'm leaning Luque via decision. It looks like Chris he's taking Stephen Thompson in this one. Assuming by decision, which, yeah, I could absolutely see it. But I'm leaning Luque for sure. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to be back in 1 minute because I just got fucking a whole bunch of distraction bullshit. So give me 3 minutes and we'll be right back. Yeah, good point by Judo Bill also. That Thompson's, that KO he took was fucking rough. Although, the videos he did in the back afterwards, talking about, how did I get back here? Did I time travel back here? Shit was real good. So, yeah, give me 1 second. We'll be right back.
Liked by the sound of violence.
When Nate does load up, boom, that's when everyone goes,
Right, and just when he gets you to that point, starts fucking with you.
Yeah, he
starts
pointing,
slapping you,
pointing
at you, stepping in, just slapping you.
You know, no one knows what the fuck he's saying with that lisp and the mouth guard in his mouth.
Right?
Yeah, I'd be fucking mad. I'd be like, dude, you can't be talking shit in mush mouth. You can't do that. That's super disrespectful. You know, at least enunciate if you're gonna talk shit to me.
Are you excited about it all?
All right, now that I'm no longer gonna piss myself and girlfriend Karen stop busting through the door like the Kool-Aid man, we will get on to the co-main event, which is Kelvin Gastelum taking on Darren Till. This fight has weird implications because of all the crazy shit that's happening around fight week. Darren Till didn't even get into New York until Friday, which was weird. He then still made weight. It is up at 185, which means he's not having to cut nearly as much as he used to. But he still did look like, I believe it was Dan Tom who tweeted out, which we retweeted, that he looked like Willem Dafoe doing a character, which he absolutely did. He was sunken in as fuck. And it doesn't give me any more confidence in Darren Till, but I had zero confidence to start with. I am very, very high on Kelvin Gastelum coming into this fight. I think that Kelvin Gastelum probably is, as close as you can get to a sure pick in this matchup. I think he has the sharper striking. I think he has the better defense. I think he has the better grappling. I think he has the better cardio. And I think he's going to be able to put it together, especially since he made weight, but didn't have to cut all of his weight, as far as I can tell. I like Till. I don't think, actually something Lil Chihuahua in the chat points out, Till's definitely going to have a big size advantage. I think that actually hurts him more than helps him in this matchup, because Kelvin's really good at closing distance, as he showed in the fight against Izzy, and especially at closing distance and then landing damage. And that combination against a guy like Till, who is so long and relies so much on just leaning back like James Vick does, I I'm real curious to see whether Kelvin Gastelum just pressures forward, is able to collapse the distance and land a giant left hand on him. I honestly would not be super surprised to see Kelvin land something similar to what Jorge landed. He doesn't use drop shifts as much as Jorge has as of late, but I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because Kelvin used a couple tricks against Izzy, which Izzy pointed out that he uses some tricks to close the distance, but he's very fucking good at it. And I think it's going to leave Till constantly questioning if he's closing the distance to land a strike or to go for a takedown. And with so much Till's game being based off of long straight lefts and just being outside of people's range, I think that's going to be... I guess for Till to win this fight, he's going to have to pot shot Gastelum and catch him with something from distance. And I think that's a very long, hard night for Darren Till to win. So, yeah, I'm taking Gastelum TKO probably second round. I think Till's going to flag towards the middle of the second round probably, especially with him having travel issues. And I don't know what his weight cut was like, but it couldn't be great, especially while having to do it, I would assume, on a plane. And yeah, as you guys are mentioning in chat, hard not to question where Till's chin is at after getting bombed on by Woodley and then getting absolutely smashed in his last fight as well by Masvidal, in a fight that, like, that was, I would argue, a much more winnable fight for Darren Till as the Masvidal fight. It's just pot-shotting Masvidal at range, and it's just a matter of, I don't think his cardio can hang. And I don't know that the move up to 185 is going to make it better, especially against a dude like Gastelum, who already has has a bunch of pressure, will push, and will just throw fucking murder balls at his head the whole time. So, yeah, I'm going to Gastelum TKO second. I'm curious to see how this one goes, though. I'm worried it's going to be a little bit of an indictment on Till's career. I think people are going to unfairly classify him as done, which he's a super young dude. And while I guess it kind of depends on how bad this knockout is, because you can't keep taking that kind of damage. To be fair, Lochwalla makes a great point in chat also, though. Gastelum took a fuck ton of damage in his last fight, and a big part of Gastelum's game has always been built around him just able to absorb damage and walk through it. I mean, the fucking Weidman fight was a great example of that, in which, like, even though Gastelum was able to put hands on Weidman, Gastelum also ate some big fucking shots from Weidman, too, and just was able to march through him up until he had trouble at the end and got caught. But, oh, man, this could be a fun fight, and I hope people don't write off Darren Till if he does lose this one rough. But I would like to see Till take some time off if he does get dropped and finish in this one. Looks like, yep, Chris is taking Kelvin Gastelum as well. Not a big surprise. Kind of surprised at how wide the line is on this. I'm not sure if it's indicative of Till's later rival to New York or if it's just the back-to-back losses Till's faced. But Gastelum's coming in at a minus 222 to a plus 180 Darren Till. Pretty interesting. That's wider than I would have thought it would have been. I would have thought maybe minus 180 or so, not minus 222 is pretty fucking wide for considering Kelvin's gotten caught a lot, especially by straight punches. But yeah, I just don't have enough faith in Darren Till's wrestling or his defense. So, and then the main event. Let's be honest. We all know I'm taking Nate Diaz. I can't not take Nate Diaz. I don't think I've ever picked against a Diaz brother on this show ever. Things that I'm worried about. Nate Diaz looked real rusty in his last fight against Anthony Pettis, especially in the first 7 or so minutes. Super fucking rusty. He relied so heavily on his clinch, which is something that normally the Diaz brothers will push to the clinch, but they'll do it not just as a mechanism to gas you, but they'll do it because people will press past their distance, to try and keep them from throwing so much volume at range. And so people will engage them in the clinch. They will then dig double underhooks and just kind of pat at you with their knuckle, like wrap you with their knuckles basically over and over again, and hit you in the body and call you a bitch a whole bunch. It was weird to see Nate intentionally push a clinch against Pettis. Brilliant fucking game planning, to be fair, because that is absolutely how you beat Anthony Pettis. I mean, it's been shown over and over again he has trouble in the clinch. Eddie Alvarez, I think, was the number one example of that. And then everyone afterwards who did it to him. But for Nate to intentionally push that game plan is impressive. I think people give Nate a little bit too much credit for the checking the kick. Especially since they were both off balance. And it was just like, Nate still isn't checking every kick thrown at him. He's not even checking half the kicks thrown at him. But he's at least aware of it. And him and his brother, especially Nate, actually, I think in the second Conor fight, was when he started doing just like that stomp check, where he'll like stomp forward to have his leg up a little bit more and catch a little bit more of the impact when he goes to, like when he jabs, he'll stomp forward with the jab to try and mitigate a little bit of that damage. I think that might play in. But honestly, the reason why I'm taking Nate Diaz is this is a 5-round fight. This was a 3-round fight. I would take Jorge Masvidal via split decision. It's a 5-round fight, so I'm taking Nate Diaz via questionable decision. I think Jorge Masvidal is going to have trouble late. I do not think anybody's going to get finished in this fight. I think they're both, I don't want to say too stubborn to go to the ground, but I don't think anybody's going to push this fight to the ground. I think if it goes there, it goes there. But I don't think anybody's going to shoot a single leg or anything. Like maybe in a wild exchange and a scramble, there might be something. But I think that it's just going to be boxing. I don't even necessarily know how many leg kicks Jorge's going to throw. Again, with like all the stupid ass implications with the BMF shit, like, these are two dudes who I rarely put much weight behind game planning when it comes to like shit talking and all that stuff. These are two dudes who I could easily see both deciding like, hey, we're not going to kick or wrestle in this fight because we're not bitches. Like, that seems like a statement either one of them could make. And I don't think it benefits either one of them to not do that. But it's something to keep an eye on. Mostly, I'm taking Nate just off volume in the last 3 rounds. I think Nate will definitely drop the first round. I think Jorge will definitely drop the last round. And then it just becomes when Nate starts taking over. The other thing with Jorge is Jorge's gotten much better at starting quickly. But if Jorge feels like he is defending shots, he feels like he's winning, even if he's not necessarily putting out the volume the other person is. That plays in almost perfectly to Nate Diaz's game plan, where he's just going to put volume out there and make you deal with constant pressure and constant volume. And half the punches he's throwing are throwaway shots anyway that he's not intending on landing, because the third or the fourth one is the one that he's actually going to put some heat behind. And just that game plan against a guy like Jorge Masvidal, who's known to just kind of, when he'll choose to be defensive and then he'll just strictly be defensive. Man, Judo Bill just brought up a great fucking point in chat, which is scar tissue. That actually, you almost swayed me with that, because I absolutely think Nate Diaz is going to be bleeding by the second round. I don't even think it's a question. I think 1,000% Nate Diaz can be bleeding by the second round. I can't remember a fight where Nate Diaz wasn't bleeding by the second round, to be fair. Him and his brother both. And absolutely that could win Jorge the second round, maybe the third, which at that point Nate Diaz has to put together a crazy run in the later rounds to get that win. I just think when Nate starts pointing and laughing and shit, it always sways judges. It is here's a fucking offensive statement. It's the Caitlin Chukagian version of gangster shit, where you are going to win rounds by pointing and laughing and putting your hands out and saying, "What, bitch?" a whole bunch. And I'm here for it. Honestly, I think this is one of the most fun matchups we will probably ever see. I think it would have been fun if it happened in fucking 2006 I think it's fun if it happens 3 years from now. Just both these dudes are always hard motherfuckers. They're always going to come out and just throw hands and make a fucking show out of it. And I'm here for this shit. What I'm not here for is Rocky Maivia coming out acting like he's going to do a fucking Mark Kerr documentary and handing the fake-ass belt off. I don't give a fuck about... Like, honestly, we can all agree that the belt exists so that they can try and give the unknown Irish sports star the belt after this. That's the only reason the belt exists. There would not be a belt if they were not trying to give it to the unnamed Irish sports star. Unfortunately, I assume they started planning on this before the second rape case. So we'll see how that plays out, but something to keep an eye on. As I've said a couple times throughout this episode, but yeesh. Yeah, I don't... Nobody should give any credit to this belt or give a fuck about this belt. They literally just basically spray painted the letters BMF on the regular belt. And it's embarrassing. Dana White wearing fucking white gloves to show that shit. But to be fair, Judo Bell Tyler in chat does make a great point. Just bleed. That's a great point. No, you know what? I've come back around. I now think that Dana White should just come out through a shower of blood and announce our future Lord and Savior Nate Diaz. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap this here. We will be back next week with Chris Mandaffer. He was going to be on this week, to be fair, but Windows updates completely bent him over and fucked him. So big shouts to Bill Gates for fucking my day up once again. In the meantime, you guys can always find us on Twitter, TSOVPod. You can shoot us an email, chris@thesoundofviolence.com. You can hit up the website, thesoundofviolence.com, where we have all the links to all the shows we talk about. And, yeah, I'm guessing we'll have Chris do another article up there here before too long. So look forward to that and enjoy this fucking fight card, you guys. It's the best fight card of the year. It doesn't get better than this shit unless Bellator decides to do Pride rules in their New Year's Eve fight, in their New Year's Eve card. Then that one might actually be super ridiculous. But I can't be more excited about this card. Big shouts out to all the terrible narratives that are going to come afterwards, especially with some of the people rumored to be in attendance. There's going to be all kinds of trash journalism next week. This was a great week for MMA podcasts with this fight coming up. I have a feeling next week is going to be hot fucking garbage. I feel like everyone's going to have the same two takes. Half of them just whining about political opinions. The other half whining about a lot of things in this card. I feel like next week's going to be rough. So just something to keep an eye on. But we will be back, and maybe we'll try and do a recap show this week if I can try and convince Chris to do it. That way we can get some more in-depth takes on some of the stuff he mentioned through text. So, here, let me, speaking of which, let me pull, who did Chris have for this main event? Chris has Masvidal, which is interesting. I'm not surprised. I think Masvidal, I'm surprised Masvidal is the favorite, but I'm not, at minus 159 to a plus 143 Diaz. I think a lot of that just is the Askren KO, though, to be honest. And I don't put a ton of weight behind that. But it'll be interesting. I think either way, I think these dudes are going to make a fuckload of a splash with this fight. So I am goddamn excited. So on that note, I am going to go get fucked up and get ready for this card. And honestly, I'm going to go edit and then write up the whole fucking description for the episode, and then I'll get fucked up and get ready for this card. So we will be back, and until next time, everybody, go do something decadent. We out. Leave.
Liked by the sound of violence.